Hello, welcome to Dream Labs, Copyright Table LLC 2022. This is Intro to Dream War, Class 4, Multiverse Civilizations and Beings. I wrote out most of it, so I'll be reading it this time rather than my last one, which was kind of improv. With an understanding that we got from the first class of this series, which was the scope of creation, we know that there are 2 trillion galaxies with each containing roughly 1 trillion stars and 400 billion planets, and in the mega universe, or the multiverse that is nearing infinite, which is creating new universes from within it, the first universe, the size is 2 trillion galaxies times the number of new universes minus the decay rate of the dying universes. Then finally we have the infinite multiverse, which is either a finite cube that is repeated infinitely, which if you start to slide from one universe to another begins genetic algorithm mating models, which grows the finite to an infinite amount over time, which is an endless amount of time, so it can never actually grow to fully infinite. And then finally the cracked finite cube multiverse, which uses intelligence within the finite cube to create an infinite branching point using a random number generator that has an infinite amount of possible numbers that it can select, tied to an information creation which allows an infinite amount of choice point branching to occur. The civilizations of the multiverse all depend on what level or type of universe, megaverse, or multiverse exists, and how well the civilization is combined with their rate of acceleration and growth to determine any understanding about them. In a single universe model, a civilization has the ability to conquer 2 trillion galaxies and use those resources of 2 trillion galaxies with 1 trillion stars and 400 billion planets per galaxy till they hit the heat death of creation and die out from the lack of thermal energy, and they have roughly 22 billion years until this happens from this current point on Earth. I wanted to make a side note here. The measurement of time as you monitor the universe is a difficult thing to do correctly. Space-time is a three-dimensional fabric which ripples at the Planck level, causing effects like quantum crystals to bounce an atomic weight back and forth, or cause compression and expansion of space-time cubes, which gives the impressions of swerving and tunneling of subatomic particles, meaning that quantum clocks are deeply affected by the size and number of black holes that are vibrating in the area, which is how black holes dissipate over a long enough time period. They're vibrating and their energy, gravity is pulling energy out of them essentially, or information, whatever you want to call it, creating the chaos on the Planck level space-time fabric and the larger macro levels of space-time, which combines the rate of entropy and the amount of stretching compared to the base level space-time fabric state before warping occurs. The faster you are traveling, the slower time occurs relative to a planet that you might be taking off from, which means according to general relativity, if you leave Earth and you had a twin, when you returned from a trip where you neared the speed of light, the twin would be far older because of the relative time zones that you were both in. The passage of time is the rate of entropic speed of the particles combined with the amount of warping of the space-time cubes. The two variables of space-time and entropic speed can be isolated from one another, I believe, which allows you to create time-well labs where time passes by extremely fast inside of the lab compared to just right outside of it. Energy machines and research and development can use these labs to gain large amounts of time relative to the civilization that it is operating on the planet that they stem from. This means that you can use a time-well lab as an energy well and create vast amounts of energy to shoot it out of the lab into the civilization's time zone, which will cause the laser segments to compress as they leave the time-well lab, and with this you can create vast amounts of energy that would have taken millions of years to produce within a few years. Or you can do research and development with computation machines in the time-well labs, so that you can do vast amounts of research that would take millions of years within a few hundred years. But to return to the main topic. Hold on. A universal civilization that has conquered all the galaxies and is using up the resources with the 22 billion years left. The age of the universe really isn't something that you can correctly measure, since millions of years are passing by in some zones, and that have black holes, while in other places it is just a few thousand years due to the warping of space-time, the rate of entropy that is being affected by the atomic weighting and the speed of the particles, till heat death. Realistically, you can't measure the age of the universe because it's inflated in some areas, it's going faster in some areas, slower in others. This civilization would have to realize early on that it must create energy or escape into another universe, which means that it might have to create another universe artificially or learn how to open up the doors into the other universes if the multiverse does exist. What sort of beings and civilizations would we see if it was just a single universe that the civilization not is occupying, or even just occupying a portion of the universe? The categorization of civilization types can be broken first into two boxes, which is hive mind singletons and collectives of individuals. Though they can live together, but I doubt it would work really well, but it is possible, and because it is possible, it does occur in a long enough time period and a big enough universe. Singletons are beings that take up entire planets without any other being living on the planet, and they can expand into space and continue to grow as a single being, though they can also create drones that have various levels of independence and consciousness and the ability to make choices and survive various amounts away from the hive mind. Survived various amounts away from the hive mind. Hive minds are broken into categories of swarm and queen, which is the difference between a hive mind without any central leadership, which is operating as a community but without a central command mind, while the queen model uses a central authority that dictates everything that the hive mind does through her worker drones. The other category of the individual has a lot of various models and sociological structures, which we know as human models, and which can also be biomimicry of animals or bug models, or things we've never seen, but with sentient and intelligent beings. As these being types and their subtypes grow and mature, their civilizations will start to expand to other planets, and through diplomacy, economic trade, or warfare, both with military kinetic strikes and information warfare, we will start to create dominant cultures. They'll start to create dominant cultures in their local areas and regions, which will expand until their galaxies are occupied by many civilizations working together, or at least in some form of peace. Or one civilization will take over all the others. In a percentage of the galaxies, there will be singletons that create and occupy the entire galaxy, which means they will have reached the level of a Type 3 civilization, but they will be a single being with a single mind, working with drones or without, making them a Type 3 being rather than civilization. In our mythos and religions, these beings will be what the angels like Metatron were described as, which is galaxy-sized beings. A single Type 3 being could defeat entire galaxy-sized civilizations filled with 400 billion planets with billions of individuals on every single planet that have entire galaxy resources at their disposal in direct conflict and warfare. The 2 trillion galaxies means that if every single galaxy was overcome and captured by a singleton, there would still be 2 trillion different individual singletons in the multiverse, which means that they would essentially be individuals like we consider human beings to be relative to the planet Earth and the human population. These singleton super-intelligent beings, which have 1 trillion stars powering their brains and operations, could create a hyper-intelligence collective, or a collective composed of super-intelligences in this universe, and there would still be 2 trillion of these beings in the collective, making them in their collective, making them as if they're individuals that have more diversity and a higher amount of different beings than the entire history of humanity has had or will have for a long time to come. If you start to expand this understanding into the mega universe or the infinite multiverse, these hyper-intelligent collectives will be created without any chance of it not occurring. Let me rephrase that. If you start to expand this understanding into the megaverse, or the universe is nearing infinite, or the infinite multiverse types, these hyper-intelligent collectives will be created without any chance of it not occurring, because of the high probability of it occurring in the sheer size of space and the long enough time that it has to occur, which means that there is or will be a hyper-intelligent collective of trillions of Type 3s or higher beings that occupy entire galaxies for their brains and bodies, which are super-intelligent beings that have been growing in ability exponentially for billions or trillions of years, both because of time elapsed and the computation rates of their brains creating relative distortion compared to humanity and other organic beings. As the civilizations, both individuals and singletons, before forming hyper-intelligent collectives when they're not a relative individual, and after they form hyper-intelligent collectives and become part of the trillions of the individuals that are occupying entire galaxies, each alone, start to expand into the multiverse or the nearing infinite mega universe, over billions to then hundreds of billions of years, jumping from one universe to the next, or creating energy to power their civilizations, they will become what I call jump civilizations, which will have finished STEM fields over eons of research and development with data collection systems that have collected and computed in supercomputers operating around stars that have Dyson spheres powering them over billions or trillions of years, allowing them to build, create literally anything they desire to create. They will be godlike. But they will also, in a finite cube, infinite multiverse, have predetermined pathways, which will be like a chess piece moving around in the field of infinite, finite multiverse cubes, meaning that they will either hit a stable point and never collapse, or will have death points in these pathways that can actually be mapped with the Multiverse Finite Cube Mapping Program that has monitored the Multiverse Finite Cubes for periods of time that allow them to begin data mining these multiverse civilizations on the atomic level using bit hash strings for entire universes and genetic mating algorithms which act as diploid recording mechanisms. this level of civilization that can monitor and watch the jump civilizations moving around. The multiverses which repeat themselves because of the finite cubes are finite over endless generational runs of genetic algorithm mating will be able to data mine their pathways, and which will either always hit a death point, which will be repeated infinitely from the first inception of the civilization of the mind of a single being to the last moment of their civilization because of the infinite nature of the finite cube multiverse fields. It is likely that this godlike being or beings monitoring the jump civilizations will start playing what we would refer to as chess, but on their level. This can occur, which means that if the model of finite multiverse fields of infinitely repeating cubes is correct, it is already occurring in a level that is above the jump civilizations, or the civilizations that take up entire multiverses. These beings would have collected and mapped the multiverse finite cube and mapped the mating of the finite cube slides while watching the civilizations grow and fall, taking the exact same pathways, alternating them all, but all of them are predetermined, making them finite, allowing them to begin moving them around and playing against each other, against other beings on the level, with what I imagine they would establish as game rules and objectives. It would be an interesting and complex game to play, and it is reality and already occurring if the multiverse finite block model repeating itself infinitely with sliding between the multiverse being possible is the correct model. This is the level of game that I will be teaching you how to play in later videos. The technology at this level is dream tech, or pretty much anything you can imagine in your mind you can engineer in reality. There will be interdimensional computer networks that allow the universes to communicate with each other directly, mapping programs that have scanned the first finite cube on the atomic level or subatomic level over the eons that it has been operating, allowing you to serial code each universe and map their mating patterns, or the sliding between the various multiverses using diploid genetic mating algorithms. You will be able to meet your exact replica from other finite multiverses that are the same serial as you, while building a framework database of the various individuals and map their neural networks and create a hash that allows you to create a server bank that is associated with their history and probabilistic frameworks of their future, which they can read, causing new pathways to form with the logic of reading your probabilistic future, causing it to morph and create new pathways. Since it is not time travel, it can be changed, reiterating itself indefinitely, so every time you read it, it changes the pathway, and then you read it again, it changes the pathway, and it's not time travel, it's just history of other multiverses that have the same predetermined variables. The insertion of beings like angels, which can be clockwork or randomized pattern generators, into a civilization to cause major pathway modulations, or insertion of a single concept at the right time to cause complete destruction of a civilization. Every single being will be mapped and cataloged, but so will entire civilizations and entire universes and entire finite multiverse cubes, along with the nearing endless progeny that they create through the eons that they are creating pathways for as they become jump civilizations, or as they're creating their jump civilization pathways. This is probably the best understanding of reality that I've come across so far. And it isn't just possible, but the probability reaches true always in the modeling that uses all the data without any outliers. It means that godlike beings exist, and they are playing games against each other using multiverse civilizations, which to us seem like the highest level of players there are, but in reality they are pieces that are being used by the real players of the game, who have mapped the first finite multiverse cube. They have mapped all the various jump points. They're essentially using civilizations that are multiverse level jump civilizations as pawns and chess pieces in a game that is so complex that we can't even really fathom it yet, I think. But this is the reality of, if you do the logic of the multiverse finite cube fields, the multiverse jumping combined with genetic mating algorithms and everything else, it's the most likely model to exist, and it is the most complete model of creation thus far. And to be honest, it brings me a little bit of solace. It's essentially you build civilizations in a multiverse, or you help grow a civilization and help it become a jump civilization. And then you know all the pathways it takes, and you're fighting another being who's doing the same, and you essentially wage war on the multiverse level with multiverse civilizations, using them as chess pieces in a game that is so complex that we don't even believe it can exist. But if you do the modeling of like what the multiverse is, the understanding of the reality that the multiverse is a finite cube that's astronomically large, but a finite cube of universes that are just repeating themselves indefinitely, what you get is squares on a chessboard that you can raise up pieces, and then you can start like having your pieces attack each other, and like for an objective that's predetermined. And it's the technology. I can theoretically like tell you how to build most of it. Like the model of the multiverse is probably the best one that exists so far, and the reality is like it's reality. Like it's the most likely explanation of what is occurring on the level that is above the multiverse jump civilizations. And so like the idea that like we're anything at any time to like any of reality, if that makes sense. Nationalism on this level of like a planet, or like a small failing broken democracy, like it's irrelevant. Nothing that is happening on this planet has any relevance to the higher game, and like we'll probably get snuffed in like a couple thousand years after another civilization that's in this galaxy sees us and we weren't ready for it, or like it's humorous to me. And so I understand that like I'm in a hive mind nest and I'm supposed to be scared, I'm being tortured and it sucks and all, but like this understanding that I have right now with this class, because it's an epiphany as I was writing it. I've thought about this before, but I've never had this clarity on it. This is the thing I should be doing. I don't really care about anything else going on, like the wars or like whatnot. Like learn from them, yeah, and scale them up to apply them on this level of the game. But like this is cool. Essentially, it's like the most complex a game can get, and it includes everything, and it simply and what it implies is that like the godlike beings that our religions described, probably lesser gods than like the creator god who created the multiverse, just beings who ascended from early on, like it's a chess game. It's a divine chess game, and like it's cool, like I guess all our suffering is irrelevant anyway, and all our joy is irrelevant. Like it's enjoyable to be in joy, and it sucks to be in suffering, but still, this is really cool. And I hope you find the same excitement I have for it as we continue these classes. Anyways.